When getting started with Western hunting, there are several different ways you can do it. And it's all going to depend on the experience you want, what you're looking to get out of the hunt, and honestly, what your budget is. And I'm not talking about the different types of species, I'm talking about DIY versus guided hunting. Those are the two major categories, although I would say that guided falls into three subcategories. On this podcast episode, I'm going to talk about the four different types of hunts that you can do out west, the pros and cons of each. By the end of this episode, you will have more information about the different types of hunts and know which style is going to be the best for you. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, I'm Andrew Kosovic. I started hunting back in 2018. I went on my very first hunt in southwestern Montana on a mule deer elk combination hunt, and I have been hooked ever since. I've hunted 6 states in 6 years. I go out west every single year, except for this year, for reasons we're not going to get into on this podcast. But please join me as I share my experiences as an emergent hunter, offer advice on how to overcome challenges, and pursue your passion for hunting. This is the second episode in a series that I am doing on getting started with Western hunting. The first episode was called The 4 Steps to Your First Western Hunt. I'll link that in the show notes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'll put a card up for it. But in that episode, I talk about the 4 steps that you should take if you've never gone on a Western hunt before so that you can make the decision to get started and know where you're going to get going. On that episode, I break down the 4 steps that you need to take when you're just getting started. It will help eliminate decision fatigue and get going on your very first hunt. I'm a firm believer that you have to get out there and get started, that most people never pursue their Western hunting dreams, mostly because they're intimidated and never take that first step. That episode, number 35, is designed to help eliminate that procrastination, that fear, that intimidation. Building on that, once you start getting into the world of hunting and you start seeing the options available to you, you have to look at the differences between going on a DIY hunt versus a guided hunt. And this can be intimidating. There are definitely some people on the internet that have stigmas about both types. And really, at the end of the day, it's all personal preference. You're out there and hunting. If it gets you in the field, I couldn't care less which option works for you. I have done both of these multiple times, and I'm not going to stop doing both of them multiple times. It's completely situationally dependent. I'm going to share my experiences, but also experiences that I have from other people doing research and assisting others getting started with Western hunting. Now, before I dive in, I just want to have a disclaimer. The prices that I'm going to talk about, I try to break down some prices for each. These are just prices that I have either researched and seen guides that offer hunts at these prices in different states, or I've paid them myself. But keep in mind, the guided hunting market is the same as any consumer market. There are different levels to pricing. There are budget hunts, there are your middle of the road hunts, and then there's going to be your premium hunts. Okay. This is the same with any type of service you pay for, whether you're paying for someone to paint your house or go on a hunt. Experience will vary depending on what you pay for. And keep in mind that you usually get what you pay for. With that in mind, if you're going to look at a guided hunt and you aren't sure where or how to start with research and you've decided that that's what you want to do, check out episode 15 of the podcast, How I Found My Elk Guide. Also going to link that in the show notes, and I will put a card for it up here in whatever corner it is. And I go through the steps that I chose to do to find my elk hunting guide. That was my first guided hunt, and it undoubtedly will not be the last for reasons that we will talk about. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, the last thing I'll say about the pricing, I'm going to try and give you a rough idea of what to expect. You will see different prices depending on the tag and the outfitter. Please don't hold them as gospel. With the disclaimer out of the way, let's dive in. So we're going to start by talking about DIY hunts. When you think of Western hunting, chances are you think about the DIY style of hunting. You, your buddies, maybe your family put in for hunts together. You draw a tag, you do a road trip, everybody goes out, you e-scout, you camp together, you hunt together, and you build lifelong memories. You're able to go out and enjoy the experience and do everything yourself. In a DIY hunt, you have to do all of the preparation, the in-season scouting. Maybe you do preseason scouting. You make a summer trip out of it and you go and try and find some animals beforehand once you know you have a tag. You cook, pack. Really, you have to do everything. Depending on the season, maybe you have to do some camp prep, chop firewood, get a fire going, clean up, make sure that you put food away if you're in bear country, and try and make sure that the camp is safe. This is the easiest type of hunt to get into. It's also the most cost effective because you pay for everything. You're not paying for anyone to do anything. So you're paying for the tag, the travel, the food, all of the gear you need, everything that you need to have in camp. This is honestly my favorite style. My favorite style is going in with my buddies and having an experience. For me, successful hunt isn't necessarily a notch tag all of the time. It is going out and making memories. Obviously, we all want to notch tags. We want to bring meat home, put food on the table. But for a lot of people, the memories and the experiences and the stories are just as valuable, if not more. When I look back at the hunts that I've done, the things that come to mind immediately are not the animal. They are the memories, the struggle that you go through, the difficult times, and the bonds formed through these shared experiences make the experience and the memory, in my opinion. And that's from times that I've had in the military, times that I've had just doing Western hunts. I think about how awful some things felt, the type 2 fun in the moment. It feels like absolute hell that you're never going to get through it. Your feet hurt, your back hurt, it's cold. You miss your family, you want hot food. But then as soon as you get back on the road, whether you notch the tag or not, you're like, damn, I'm gonna have to wait a whole year to do this again. At least if you hunt once a year like me. This is the quintessential type. And the obvious pros of this are it's very flexible. But there are buts. Like there are cons to the DIY style of hunting. You have to do everything yourself. And when you're first getting started, that means that realistically your first few hunts probably not going to be successful. You're not going to know what you're doing. You could do all of the research in the world and it's still going to be different on the ground. And that's just reality. And I'm not trying to dismiss it. I don't want the rest of this podcast to seem like an advertisement for guides because it's not going to be. There are benefits to guides. There are. And we'll get to those later. But it all depends on the type of experience you want and honestly your budget. Hunting has sort of become, I don't want to say it's become a rich man's sport, but it definitely feels like that with some states and some types of hunts where you almost have to pay for a guide if you want to have success. Or if you want to target a species where you basically can't without doing it with a guide. I mean, like, just going to be honest, if I ever draw a sheep tag, I'm not doing that DIY. It's not happening. But the biggest con, specifically since we're talking about DIY hunting right now, the biggest con since we're talking about DIY hunting right now is just you have to build the experience yourself, which is also a pro. You have to learn and do. But in the beginning, especially when you're not sure what you're doing, there's going to be a lot of hard won lessons. Obviously, you save a significant amount of money doing it that way, but it is a reality. If your goal is to find success as soon as possible, DIY hunting is probably not the solution. If your goal is to make memories and figure it out along the way, DIY is for you. And that's kind of the way that I have approached my hunts generally. And it's why my preferred method is DIY hunting. So let's get started talking about guided hunts. I mentioned in the beginning that there are 3 subcategories of guided hunts. I'm going to talk about all 3 of them, the pros and cons of each. But in general, why would you want to go guided? Well, the major reason is knowledge. In all the 3 subtypes, you are paying for some form of knowledge. You are getting a local person who does this type of hunting, is always in the area, knows where animals are, understands their habits, where they like to be, where they don't like to be. And you're paying for that. You might be paying for private land access as well. There's different things that you can pay for, like travel and food, and your mileage may vary. But the biggest advantage is a transfer of knowledge from someone with more experience, whether it's in years of experience or just in the area, to you. So, the three subtypes that I'm going to talk about, and this is just my opinion. Other people out there might think there are different subtypes, and arguably there are even more subtypes underneath each because different outfitters have different packages. But in general, I like to think of guided hunts in three different categories. You have your guided public land hunting, you have guided private land hunting, and then semi guided hunting. And we're going to talk about all three of those and what I think are the pros and cons of each. I've done two of the three. I have not done semi guided hunting, just full disclosure. So everything that I say is just going to be from researching what I've seen on the internet. So keep that in mind. I'm going to start with guided public land hunting because this is the one that I had the most experience with. If you listened to episode 15 of the podcast, How I Found My Elk Guide, I talk about my Arizona elk guide. And that was, and let me share why I wanted to go on a guided hunt for this. So this was in 2022. So this was my fourth year of hunting. My first season was in 2018. It was also going to be my third elk hunt ever. I had 7% draw odds at getting that tag and knew that realistically it should have probably taken me 6, 7, maybe even 8 years to draw that tag. And I drew it the second year of applying. I didn't have a lot of elk hunting experience. I had done 2 elk hunts before that, and one was going to be the same year in Utah. I went on 2 Western hunts in 2022. Knowing that, I was probably not going to draw that tag again for many years, which it's been 2 years, haven't drawn it again. I've applied every year. Knowing that, again, I was probably not going to draw it for many years, but also that I just didn't have the experience. And I wasn't going to have a lot of time to prep because I was already going all in on my Utah hunt with Peter. It just made sense for me to try and find a guide. I wanted to maximize the hunting experience. And no offense to that hunt with Peter, if I'm going to spend money on a guide for a hunt, either for an over the counter bull in Utah or a drawn hunt in Arizona, I'm going to go with the drawn hunt in Arizona. The prices are probably similar, and I wanted to get a good bull and have a good hunting experience. So I decided to pay for a guide and hunt in Arizona, and it worked. On the 5th day of the hunt, we found the first and only bull of the hunt, and I found success. I took a perfect shot at about 180 yards, heart shot, stood up, died basically right in its bed. Literally did not run 2 yards. For me, at that moment, that was worth it. And that hunt and those experiences, I will never forget. Could I have done that DIY? Possibly. But I learned a lot from my guide. And I have zero regrets about going on that hunt. So what kind of experience is it like to have a public land guided hunt? Well, in general, outfitters, from my experience, offer 2 different types of hunts for these public land guided hunts. They're, in the case of my guide, it was called fully outfitted versus just guided. And the primary difference is in the amount of gear that you bring. And the price was not very different at all. It was like $1,000 difference. So I paid about $6,000 for my public land elk hunt. That's not including the tag. The tag was on top of that. So what did I get from that? I got a Arizona local who has been guiding for, I forget how long Chris was guiding for. I want to say he's been guiding for over 20 years, specifically in Arizona. He does multiple elk hunts every single year. He was one-on-one with me, which is something that we'll talk about. He provided camp and he provided all of the food and was the camp cook. So all I had to do was have the tag, a good attitude, be physically in shape to do it, ready to go, and bring the gear that I needed, which is specifically, your emergency gear, medical kit, and they have that stuff too, but you should always have your own. The rifle, ammunition, pack, boots, clothes, things like that. The biggest benefit that I got, though, wasn't even the experience necessarily on that hunt. I asked Chris a million questions. I'm probably not exaggerating. I took down notes on everything we talked about. We didn't just talk about elk. We talked about different species. We talked about where elk like to bed, generally how they like to be, where they are, how to track. On my third elk hunt, I was able to obtain a wealth of knowledge about elk hunting and hunting in general. A lot of local knowledge specifically for Arizona as well that I never would have found. Like, this is the stuff that you can't find on the internet. This is the stuff that only comes from experience, and that experienced people aren't going to share with just anyone. Which I should say, if you're going to go on a guided hunt, go with the right attitude. Work hard. Don't be a pain in the ass to the guide. Ask good, meaningful questions, and don't expect them to wait on you like you're in a hotel. That is not what this is. You are partners, you're paying for an experience, and the guide usually works for an outfitter. Most of the time, they are not the owner. So treat them with respect like a normal human. Show up, have a good attitude, and do good work. And they will most likely treat you with respect in return. But for me, in this instance, what I was paying for mostly was just the knowledge, the experience, and the higher chances of finding success. I think on that hunt, the success ratio is, I want to say it was around 20%. And that means a lot of people go out there and they don't get anything. And some of those probably are guides. A guide is not a magic solution. They are not going to guarantee a hunt. The only way you are going to find a guaranteed shot opportunity, and I don't think any guide would advertise guaranteed success, but they will say guaranteed shot opportunities. And you're only going to find that on private land. Specifically, you will find that everywhere in Texas. But private land will give you guaranteed shot opportunities most of the time. So, should you go with a public land guided hunt? Maybe. If you are looking of the types of true guided hunts, these are going to be cheaper. So you can find guided hunts generally. I mean, I've seen elk hunts as cheap as 4,500, and I've seen them as high as 9,000 on public land. And those prices are going to vary. A lot of guides and outfitters are going to do 2-on-1 hunts for those easier to draw areas or over the counter areas. So if you're looking at doing a guided hunt in a state like Colorado or Montana, where it's relatively easy for you to get a tag, chances are you're looking at a 2-on-1 hunt, which means that if it's a $5,000 hunt, that each of you is paying $5,000 for your guided experience. So keep that in mind. That is how those pricing generally goes. But I would say there are two reasons why I would do personally a public land guided hunt. The first is I want to shortcut the experience. I want to have access to someone local that does this all the time that I can ask questions to and learn from. That to me is the biggest benefit of going on a guided hunt is you get to shortcut the learning experience and make it easier for you. It's like paying for a mentor. The second is realistically higher success, a higher chance of success. This is hunting. There are no guarantees. But by going with someone that knows more about the area than you, that has that experience, you are improving your odds of coming home with a notched tag. So if you drew a tag that is, a nicer tag on public land, you want to go and find success, it's worth considering going on a guided public land hunt. For some units, like if I draw a sheep tag, there are some states that I apply for sheep every year. If I ever get lucky and draw one of those tags, you can bet I'm paying for a guide. There's no way I am risking that. I am going to save up the money and pay for a guide. I'm going to find a way because most of those tags you don't get to draw twice. You have to maximize on it. So for me, those are the types of areas where you would want to pay for a guide on public land. Which brings us to our second type of guided hunting. A lot of the same benefits as public land, but on private land. So generally, you are paying for local area knowledge, someone with significantly more experience than you most of the time. They usually provide food. And on private land, and obviously the benefit of private land access. This is something that you did not have on the public land side. Most of the time, and on the one private land hunt I've done in Texas, they provide a place for you to stay. So Even on a guided public land hunt, you might be doing a drop camp coming in on horses. You might be backpacking in. You might do a base camp from a vehicle. There are a lot of varieties there. Most of the time, when I have seen private land hunting, there is some type of lodge. Now, the lodge may or may not have power, depending on where you are, how in the wilderness you are, but usually you have somewhere to stay that is protected from the elements. In addition to that, you're going to get your camp cook. I don't think anyone offers, I mean, I'm sure they offer packages where they don't have it, but in general, you're going to get a camp cook in addition to the private land access and the experience of a guide who works and lives on this ranch, most likely. This is the sort of premier type of hunting, I would say. When you want the best of the best, when you look at what Joe Rogan and Cam Hanes do, this is what they're doing. They are paying for a private land hunt. Now, sometimes they do the third option, which I call semi guided, but for the most part, they are hunting with a guide on private land, big swaths of private land in Colorado, Utah, or other states that have easy to get tags. It's private land. They can control the landscape and the environment to want bulls to stay in the case of elk, great buck habitat, or they are just ranches and pronghorn love to go there. I mean, the best pronghorn are generally found on private land. You can find great ones on public, but if you want to shortcut your success to finding a good pronghorn, go to New Mexico and pay for a private land hunt. They have guaranteed tags, and yeah, you'll have a good time. I've never done it, but it's on the list of things that I want to do. But when it comes to private land guided hunts outside of New Mexico pronghorn, we're going to talk about elk again here in a minute. In almost all cases, you're still going to need to draw a tag. There are some areas where you can get landowner tags, like New Mexico, but that isn't the case everywhere. If you draw a tag in Montana for like an elk combination tag, you can get private land access, but in order to have the tag, you still need to draw it in the draw. So keep that in mind. Trying to go guided private land does not guarantee that you are going to have a tag. You are still going to have to put in and draw a tag based on whatever the state's rules and regulations are for the state you're trying to hunt in. The distinct difference between private and public guided hunts are reduced hunting pressure. Chances are you're going to be one of, if not the only people hunting on that piece of private land during the hunting season. So if you want to have the best hunting experience where you are mimicking what wilderness should be, you are not dealing with hunting pressure, you're going to be able to see animals that are probably less cagey because they're not getting shot at every single day. Guided private land hunts are likely what you're looking for. But keep in mind, you're going to pay for that. To provide an example of this, let's talk about New Mexico private land elk hunting. There are outfitters in New Mexico that get guaranteed landowner tags. So the state determines how many tags they can get, and you are guaranteed a tag if you put in with this outfitter. Now, in the first category of public land hunting, the prices were, $4,500 to $9,000 ish. Private land New Mexico is, I would say, you're going to start at $10,000. And I've seen them over $20,000, $22,000. It all depends on how great the unit is, the outfitter, how well desired they are. Mileage will vary significantly on the price. So you're going to have to keep that in mind if this is the type of hunt that you want to do. Chances are you're going to pay more. Now, I have seen in other states where there are not guaranteed tags for elk hunts starting around $8,000, but I don't know that I've seen guided private land hunts at much less than that. So in a private land guided hunt, you get all of the benefits of public land with the additional benefits of chances are you're going to live or stay in a permanent weatherproof structure, which you're not going to have on public land, but also you are getting that private land access and reduced hunting pressure. And it comes at a cost. Lastly, we have what I call the semi-guided hunts. These are available on public land and private land. Not all outfitters offer these, so you may not see them. They're not nearly as common. But essentially what a semi-guided hunt is It is either going to be something like a drop camp where you have an outfitter bring you into a piece of public land that is more difficult to access. They might do that on horses. They might bring you with llamas or mules or something, and they will bring you to an area that they know well, that they know their animals are. You're still getting local knowledge, but you're not going to get it every single day, and they're not going to do the hunt for you. They will give you that knowledge up front, help you get to the area, and that is about the extent of it. It's similar on private land, but you are hunting on private land. You could think of that as just simply getting access to private land. You're paying for private land access. You'll still get knowledge. They'll obviously know the private land, it's their land, but you are not going to get the day to day guided hunting experience. That being said, these are cheaper. I've seen drop camps as low as $3,000 for public land, and I've seen private land as low as $4,500. So you get the private land access, you get some local knowledge, but you have to do all of the hunting, probably the cooking, camp maintenance, and everything yourself. You might have access to a place to stay, but you're doing all of the hunting yourself. So, what are the advantages of going with the semi guided route? Well, on the semi guided public side, I think you still get that local knowledge. You have someone that you can talk to. And most of the time, I've seen these as drop camps. So you are getting put in an area that is going to be more difficult for others to access, which should increase your chances of finding success in theory. You would get put in an area, you're a little bit more remote, away from other hunters, and you're going to be able to talk to someone that knows this and does multiple of these drop camps every single year, gets to talk to hunters about what they found and see whether or not they took animals. So they're going to know the area, they're going to put you in a spot that's good, and it saves you from necessarily having to do all of the e-scouting and figuring out where to go. On the private land side, you obviously get the private land access, which is going to have reduced hunting pressure, and you're going to have access to the local knowledge and, well, I would say probably, arguably, much higher success odds. But again, just like with the guided public versus guided private, you're going to get what you pay for, and it's going to cost a premium by comparison. Semi-guided hunts are usually reserved for people that have some experience, but don't necessarily know the area as well. So you get to talk to someone, get put in an area, but you know what you're doing. You know generally how to elk hunt, how to mule deer hunt, things like that. You just want to get a little bit of assistance in an area you're not familiar with. So those are the three different types. Before I end this podcast and summarize it, I just want to talk about the internet. As with everything when it comes to hunting, unfortunately, we do not know how to agree with each other. If you are a compound bow shooter, the comparison I always like to go to is compound versus recurve and traditional bows versus crossbows. Everyone has an opinion, and that is also true with guided versus non-guided hunts. There are some people who swear by guided hunts. They will only do guided hunts, and they think they're the best. There are some people that refuse to do guided hunts, and they think that they're a sham and that you're not a real hunter if you do guided hunts. The reality is, who cares what random people on the internet think? If this is what is going to make you happy, if this is what's going to get you hunting, if this is what's going to give you the confidence to go out and fill your tag and enjoy the experience, do it. If they're not going to be at your funeral, if they don't have your phone number, who cares? Be happy with the experience that you've built and go for it anyway. Any real hunter, a person of quality and character, is not going to care whether or not you did a guided hunt or otherwise, because it's still hard work. I can tell you from personal experience doing both private land guided hunts and public land guided hunts. It's still hard work. You are still putting miles on your boots. You are still scouting. You are still looking. It's not like you're not there. You're still doing the work, and you still have to pull the trigger or release the arrow. It's still hunting. Don't let the opinions of other people sway you from starting or doing something that is going to give you a profound experience. With that out of the way, let's summarize again what these different types are. So in the beginning, I said there were 4 different types. There's the true DIY style of hunt. There is the guided public land, guided private land, and semi-guided. I also said that by the end of this, you would know which would be best for you. So DIY is if you want the full experience, if you want to figure everything out and have to rely solely on yourself. You want to build memories with your friends. You want to go out and experience the adventure of a lifetime. on your own, DIY. It's also if you're interested in saving money and you don't have the budget for a guided hunt. I certainly can't afford to do a guided hunt every year. And that's just the reality for a lot of people. Guided public land hunting gives you significant experience. Someone local that hunts in the area, it is an option that I would use if I was trying to maximize my chances of success on a tag that I've been putting in for several years and I don't want to slip up. Guided private land hunt is honestly kind of the same thing, except I am looking for the best of the best experience. If you have been putting in for a long time for a tag, or if you happen to have a good amount of money and just want to have the best hunt, you want the biggest bull you can get, chances are that's going to be on a guided private land hunt. And then semi-guided is sort of the balance between the two. You are paying for local information in one time, probably access to an area on public that's harder to reach, or private land access, and you are getting that local guide information at one time, but you have to do the day-to-day hunting. You should have more experience going into a semi-guided hunting experience. And those are the 4 different types. I hope this helped you learn more about the high-level types of hunting. Those are the different experiences that you can have and know which one roughly is going to work best for you. And I don't think that there is one true answer. I think that it should change over time based on the tag you draw and what you're looking to get out of the experience. But I hope this illuminated some things for you. I feel like we don't talk about the different types enough, and that most people end up having to do research online and aren't sure what to figure out. So in closing, I want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. If you made it all the way here. Now, before I actually close this podcast out, I do want to plug a service that I started doing as this is coming out. So I'm going to say this. This podcast is coming out June of 2024. I am doing free Western hunting consultations for people that either have zero experience with Western hunting or hunting in general, or have hunting experience chasing whitetail deer, maybe turkey, and they want to go out and do their first Western hunt. You can join the waiting list. I only do 5 sessions of these each month. I've already done all of them for June. So I am currently accepting people on the waiting list for July. I will link this in the show notes, but you can just go to endurhunt.com, endurhunt.com, and you will see the waiting list and you will hear from me. And I'll be sending out that email early July to get people booked on my calendar. And it's been really good so far. So I'm hoping to help more people out. That self-advertising plug out of the way. If you've made it this far in the podcast, I just want to say thank you so much for listening. I know that time is our most valuable asset. I don't want to take it for granted that you chose to spend it with me. I hope that you learned something in this podcast. I hope it brought you some value. I just want to say I appreciate you. I'll see you next time.